So you want to like tofu, but you're finding it kind of mushy and bland. Well, then you need to master crispy tofu. It's a crowd pleaser, even with little kids and picky eaters, and it's super versatile. This is a recipe I think everyone should have in their back pocket, so today I'm breaking down 4 ways to make crispy tofu. Air fried, pan fried, oven baked, and deep fried. I'll help you decide which method is best for you, share all my tips and tricks, and show you 4 of my favorite dishes to enjoy it in. We're going to start with the method that I personally use most often, which is air frying. For me, this is the fastest method. It gets the tofu super crispy, and most importantly, there's minimal cleanup and hands-on time. So it's just great for those nights when I'm busy or I don't have a lot of energy to cook. Extra moisture is the enemy of crispiness, so I recommend pressing your tofu first. A tofu press makes this super easy, but if you don't have one, my favorite way to do it is to either cut or tear my tofu into pieces, lay it out on 1/2 of a clean kitchen towel, fold the other half over top, and weigh it down with something moderately heavy and flat. I usually use a cutting board. Let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, there are 2 other popular methods of firming up and removing extra moisture from tofu. The first is freezing and defrosting it, and the second one is brining it in salt water. I am going to touch on both of those methods a little bit later in the video, but for now, let's move on to the next step for our crispy air fryer tofu. After pressing my tofu and cutting or tearing it into bite-sized pieces, I'll add them to a bowl or a big reusable bag and toss them with olive oil, salt, and pepper till they're evenly coated. If you want, you can also add spices like onion and garlic powder or paprika at this point. Next, you're going to toss with your starch of choice. Potato starch is my personal favorite for air-fried, baked, and deep-fried tofu. It has a super light and crispy texture, but I've also tested these recipes with cornstarch, tapioca starch, and arrowroot starch, and the results are fairly similar. One quick note, I know a lot of people use the air fryer because they want to cook with less oil, and technically you can make this recipe oil-free, but I don't recommend it because it has a bit of a chalky texture. The starch really does need some kind of oil to crisp up properly. I would recommend at least using like a spray oil and hitting it just until that powdery finish is gone. Now add those into your air fryer basket. You don't want to overcrowd the basket, but in my experience, it's totally fine if the tofu pieces are overlapping a little, as long as you make sure to give the basket a good shake a few times while they're cooking. Every air fryer is a little different, but I set mine to 400 degrees and usually 20 to 22 minutes is perfect to get the tofu nice and crispy. I shake the basket about every 5 minutes so the pieces cook evenly, and feel free to add more time as needed depending on your air fryer until it's as crispy as you like. One of my favorite ways to serve crispy air fryer tofu is in a homemade takeout style recipe like orange tofu. To make the sweet and tangy orange sauce, combine soy sauce, brown sugar, orange juice, orange zest, rice vinegar, toasted sesame oil, and cornstarch. In a skillet, sauté fresh minced garlic, ginger, scallions, and red chili flakes until the scallions are translucent. Then pour in the sauce, let it simmer to thicken, and then toss in the crispy air fryer tofu. This is one of our favorite recipes when we're craving Chinese takeout, but we want to save money and enjoy a little bit of a lighter version of it. So I have some notes here. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons. Pros of air fryer tofu, like I said before, it's super quick and easy for me. I don't need to preheat my oven. I don't have to babysit the tofu and be flipping it all the time. I can just let the air fryer do its thing while I'm steaming vegetables or making a really simple sauce. Cleanup is also really quick, and I use this method all the time during the summer when I just don't want to be warming up the house with my oven. I think this gives the crispiest texture with the least effort. As for the cons, I think the main one is that you're limited in terms of how many blocks of tofu you can do at one time. I think an average sized air fryer could fit 2 blocks of tofu, but more than that, you're going to start producing a lot of steam, and it's going to cause the starch to kind of gelatinize, so the pieces are going to want to stick together. So for large batches, I would recommend baking, which I will touch on later. Next up, we are making crispy pan-fried tofu. This is the method that I use second most often, and it's great for days when I just want an easy one-pan dish with minimal cleanup. So same as with the air fryer method, press your tofu and then cut or tear it into pieces. For pan-fried tofu, I usually will just cube it since that'll maximize the surface area that's in contact with the hot pan, so everything gets nice and evenly crispy. Add your starch of choice to a bowl and season with salt, pepper, and any other spices you want, and toss your tofu to thoroughly coat it. Typically for this method, I will use cornstarch. I've found that potato starch gets really sticky before it crisps up, and it's just a little bit of a hassle to keep the tofu pieces from sticking together or to the pan. I don't really have this issue with cornstarch. Now add several tablespoons of oil to a pan over medium-high heat and add in the tofu pieces. And when it comes to quality cooking oil, I'm a huge fan of Graza, who are today's video sponsor. Graza makes my absolute favorite extra virgin olive oil. You'll see me using it in pretty much every single video on this channel, and I love it for a few reasons. First, the quality is incredible, but it comes at a really reasonable price. Secondly, it's made of single origin, single varietal olives. They are Picual olives from Spain, and the oil is always fresh and never blended. Lastly, I really love their squeeze bottle. It's really cute and it's also practical. It's easy to dispense exactly what you need, and the opaque bottle protects the oil from sunlight to keep it fresh and delicious. So you may have seen me use these before. This is their original duo. It comes with their sizzle oil, which I use for everyday cooking like sauteing. I use their drizzle as a finishing oil or to make salad dressings. This one has a really robust kind of grassy flavor that really elevates dishes, and they've recently added a new oil to their lineup. It's called Frizzle. Frizzle is going to be your go-to for all your high heat cooking needs. It is the same high quality 100% olive oil that you expect from Graza, but it's naturally refined, so it has a more neutral flavor and a higher smoke point. You can use Frizzle wherever you need a neutral oil, whether that is pan frying, cooking in a super hot wok, or even baking. Graza is now offering the Trio bundle, which comes with the classic sizzle and drizzle along with a new Frizzle oil. This is the perfect gift for yourself or any of the foodies in your life, covers all your bases. If you want to give Graza a try, go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen or visit the link in my description, and you can get 10% off the Trio. Thank you so much to Graza, and now let's get back to pan frying our tofu. Pan fry the tofu on the first side for a few minutes without touching it until it's slightly golden brown. If the tofu's sticking to the bottom of the pan, let it keep cooking for an extra minute or so. The starch needs enough time to develop a crust before it releases from the pan. A non-stick skillet will definitely give you some extra insurance against sticking, but either way, the key is patience. One of my favorite ways to serve pan-fried tofu is this sweet chili tofu. This is actually one of the first tofu recipes I ever shared on the channel like 8 years ago, and I still make it on those days when I need a quick, easy meal that doesn't require a ton of prep work. Once I've crisped up my tofu, I set it aside temporarily in a bowl or a plate. In the same pan, I then stir fry some onions and red bell peppers till they're cooked but still a little crisp. Add back in the tofu, toss with some store-bought sweet chili sauce, top with scallions, and serve with rice. And this is really just a formula. You can do this with any stir-fry veggies you like and any store-bought sauce you happen to have in your fridge. Now let's move on to the pros and cons for pan-fried tofu. Pros: it's very easy, straightforward. Pretty much everyone owns a skillet. It's also great if you don't have the counter space for an air fryer, or you just don't like having a bunch of different appliances. You don't have to warm up your kitchen by using your oven. The tofu also gets very crispy. Cons: again, just like the air fryer tofu, you're limited in space. You don't want to overcrowd your pan because then the tofu is going to steam and it's going to want to stick together. So if you want to make more than one block of tofu, you're probably going to have to do it in batches or have two pans going at the same time, which can be a little overwhelming. And then of course, it's also just more hands-on time in flipping the tofu. So if you're making a meal that has a lot of different components, it can be kind of crazy. You might want something a little more hands-off, like the air fryer or the oven. Another potential con, depending on your diet, is that you do have to use quite a bit of oil, less than deep frying, but you do need a layer of oil in there for it to actually get crisp. Can't really skimp on that. So the third way I like to make crispy tofu is in the oven. This is ideal if you need to make a large batch, say you're meal prepping or you just have a large family. And it's also great if you're going to have the oven on already for a different reason. So if I'm roasting veggies, I'll just go ahead and throw my tofu in there as well. Preheat your oven to 425 degrees. The prep for this recipe is the same as the air fryer tofu. Just press your tofu, cut or tear it into pieces, toss with oil, salt, pepper, and any spices you like, and then toss with the starch of your choosing. Once again, I'm going with potato starch. Spread the tofu out on a baking sheet. Usually I'll line mine with parchment or a silicone mat for easier cleanup, but it's not a must. Then bake until crispy. This usually takes 30 to 35 minutes for me, but you can add extra time as needed. Give the tofu a quick toss at the halfway point to help it brown evenly. I make baked tofu most often during the fall and winter because I tend to roast a lot of vegetables during the colder months, and I'll make things like grain bowls or big salads with roasted vegetables and tofu. An example of what that might look like is this Nourish bowl with crispy baked tofu, roasted sweet potatoes, and cauliflower. And I can roast all these things together on one sheet tray, so it's super convenient. I'll serve that over rice, quinoa, or noodles, and then top with a flavorful sauce like a creamy tahini dressing or chimichurri. So to recap the pros of baking tofu, it's very easy, hands-off, great if you're making other meal components, and it's the best method for large batches. And you can also get away with using less oil than with pan-fried or deep-fried. As for the cons, the oven does dry out the tofu more, so it's kind of not just crispy, but a little chewy. Some people might like that, but if you want tofu that has a crispy outside, but the inside is still kind of like soft and custardy, I would recommend one of the other methods. Then the last thing is this is the method that takes the longest because you do have to preheat your oven and then it goes for usually like 30 to 35 minutes. But that could even itself out if you're gonna have to make multiple batches using a different one of the methods. Does that make sense? And now for our final method. This one's definitely the least practical. I usually reserve it for days when I'm craving something a little bit more indulgent, when I'm kind of wanting to replace takeout, and that is deep fried tofu. This is gonna start out exactly the same way as the pan fried tofu. Press your tofu, cube or tear it into pieces, and then toss it in a starch of choice until it's thoroughly coated. I'll usually use cornstarch or potato starch when I'm frying my tofu. And when it comes to frying, I recommend using a pan that's on the thicker side, like a cast iron or a Dutch oven. It'll keep the temperature more stable since these types of pans retain heat really well. If you use something thinner like a stainless or a wok, that's fine. You may just need to keep a closer eye on the temperature of your oil. I also like something with high sides so the oil doesn't splatter on my work surface. Okay, so let's heat our oil up over medium-high. I typically aim for about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a little on the hot side, but once we add our tofu, it's gonna bring the temperature down to about 375-ish, which is perfect for this recipe. Also, I highly recommend using a thermometer if you can. It's gonna make sure that your tofu doesn't come out greasy because the temperature of the oil was too low. Stir the tofu once after you add it to the oil, then let it fry undisturbed for about a minute or two to start setting that crust. Now you're gonna go in with tongs or chopsticks and carefully pull apart any pieces that are sticking together. Then let everything continue to fry for another several minutes, usually about 4 to 6 in total, until the pieces are crispy and starting to take on some color. I like to transfer my fried tofu to a wire rack over a cookie sheet so any excess oil can drip off. A paper towel-lined plate is another option. This fried tofu is really delicious on its own, so when I serve it, I like to keep it pretty simple with this salt and pepper tofu. After frying your tofu, take a tablespoon or two of that frying oil and add it to a wok or frying pan. Add in minced garlic and sliced peppers. We're using serranos here, but you can use red bell peppers if you're not a spice lover. Stir fry for just a few minutes till the peppers are tender, then add in the crispy tofu. You're gonna toss everything with this incredible spice mix that consists of salt, 5 spice powder, white pepper, and garlic powder. I like to garnish this with some sliced scallions. This dish is simple but so flavorful and addictive. Serve with lime wedges to add a little bit of freshness. As for the pros of this method, personally, I do think it's the most tasty. I can't deny that. It's gonna make any dish you add it to feel like it's from a restaurant. It's super crispy and it stays crispy for a long time, even if you toss it with a sauce and it sits for a while. And I know frying can seem a little intimidating to some. I wouldn't say it's actually that time consuming or difficult. It's just like a little bit of a hassle. I did also burn myself just a teensy bit, so there's always a hazard there with hot oil. Same goes for pan-fried tofu though. So exercise extreme caution. It's pretty straightforward though, especially if you have a thermometer. I do reserve this, like I said, for special occasions because of the con, which is health or lack thereof. And I know you can reuse frying oil technically, but I don't fry that often, so every time I do fry, I have to use a couple cups of oil, and then what do I do with it afterwards? My fiance Eric swears that the pan-fried tofu is just as good and as crispy as the deep-fried tofu. You know, for like the effort to reward ratio. I think skillet tofu is good enough. Now, I know I also said I would touch on the 2 other popular methods of pressing tofu, namely freezing and defrosting it and brining it. So you can freeze and defrost the tofu and then just press out the extra moisture prior to any of the recipes that I mentioned in this video. It's gonna firm up the texture, give it a little bit of a meatier chew, and make it a bit spongy. I really like this method when I'm making things that I want to taste kind of chickeny, things like my tofu katsu, which I have in my killer tofu video. Personally, I don't recommend this technique for baked tofu because the oven convection dries out the tofu already, and it's just a bit too dry that way. As for the salt brining method, this leverages osmosis to pull extra moisture out of the tofu, and boiling it also tightens up the proteins. This is more of like a traditional Chinese way of preparing tofu. So for example, Made with Lao uses it in his recipe for salt and pepper tofu. I like tofu this way, but personally when I'm making crispy tofu, I don't usually do it because it just requires a couple of extra steps and extra dishes. But I do really like this method for things like soups, curries, or Buddhist feast where I'm not going to be crisping up the tofu ahead of time. So anywhere the texture and flavor of the plain tofu is going to be front and center, I think this is perfect for that. So the moment everyone's been waiting for, what is the best way to make crispy tofu? That depends on you. If you care about using less oil, you're going to use the air fryer or the oven. If you care mostly about speed and convenience, I would recommend a skillet or the air fryer. If you care most about the crunch and the flavor, you're definitely going to want to go with deep fried or pan fried. And lastly, if you care most about having some hands-off time, use the oven or the air fryer. And that wraps up today's video. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in more tofu recipes, we actually have an entire playlist and tons of tofu recipes on our website, sarahsvegankitchen.com. Subscribe for more plant-based recipes, and I will see you very soon. Bye.